Use the raise your hand feature in Zoom when you would like to speak on an item, and also lower your hand when you're finished speaking. Please unmute when called to speak and mute yourself when you are done speaking. If you are calling in by phone, identify yourself by name before speaking on an item. Press star 9 on your phone to raise and lower your hand. Press star 6 if you're participating by phone to mute and unmute. Okay, I would like to call this meeting of the Governance and Ethics Committee of September 11th, 2023 to order. Staff, could you call the roll, please?
Chair Jane,
Here.
Committee Member Gilmore, and Committee Member Shahal.
Present.
Okay, all present. The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar, which is the minutes? Yes, Committee Member Shahal.
Thank you, Chair. My only concern is on June 5th, we decided that the Council Policy 020 will be taken up today, which is not taken up. And I know it is deferred from today as a further agenda item. So I'm a bit disturbed about it. We should have taken that up today instead of deferring it to December meeting. That's my only comment. Other than that, I will make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Okay, is there a second? All right. Moved by Committee Member Chahal, seconded by Gilmore. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Now we move on to public presentations. Would any member of the public wish to address this body on any matter that is not on the agenda? Okay. One member.
Green, got it. On June 4th, 2023, the day before this committee met last, I sent an email to these committee members, city manager and city attorney. This is what I said. Can I please understand why the grand jury report is still not on the agenda of this committee? It is now the third committee meeting since the report's release and has not been addressed. Thankfully, the Independent Ethics Commission topic is on the agenda, but that is just one of many items that need to be discussed. It is embarrassing to see that ethics and the issues of public trust are being ignored by this council and staff. This is the Ethics Committee, yet ethics is not discussed. Can the city attorney require the grand jury report to be on the agenda? Can it be prioritized over minor things like who can give out proclamations or who can attend a conference? I mean, really, are these two things more important than public trust in the city? The city council's majority consistently dismissed the need to have an independent ethics commission be formed because a report can be reviewed by this very committee. Not only has nothing been done on this front, but the chair seems to be purposefully ignoring the need to discuss and focus on ethics in city government. Please do what you got to do in the civil grand jury and put this in front of the committee. 15 minutes after sending that, I got a response from Chair Jane. Kirk, the grand jury report was discussed at length in the city council meeting on December 8th, and the council submitted responses to the district attorney's office. I suggest you review the video of that meeting. At previous G&E meetings, we discussed the work plan and priorities, SUDS. So that being said, and there was some more dialogue. I'll submit to the record the email exchange that Chair Jane and I had. But my question to this committee and to staff, the leaders of our city, is why isn't this being prioritized? The reason it was not discussed at council in depth was because this committee was the place to discuss it. And not once has this committee discussed it. And I think you should look at yourselves and say, why are we not discussing this? What are we afraid of? And why aren't we bringing this up? Because that, to me, is what this council committed to on December 8th and during the various meetings that took place. Vice Mayor Parks specifically said that this is the committee to discuss governance and ethics and all the issues that come up in the grand jury report. Yet the grand jury report has never shown up on this committee's agenda that I've seen. A commission has, and was practically berated by Chair Jane and Chair Committee Member Chahal as being a waste of time. We have to do a whole bunch of searching and analysis and talk to cities. My question is, why is the ethics of this city not part of this meeting today and every day until it's resolved? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other member of the public? Yes, Dr. Shanks.
I wasn't going to speak today, but for the last month or so, or maybe it's more than that, I've been studying the discussion that you had about an independent ethics commission on July 11th. And I have to say that I found the discussion tremendously upsetting. I found it unprepared, unfocused, unprofessional, and ultimately unhinged at the end. And just very quickly, saying it's unprepared, what I thought potentially was going to happen, that was the first meeting, I think, that all of you with the new city manager and the city attorney were, the whole council with the new team, had the opportunity to let the public know that you care about ethics, that you've read the ethics code, that you're trying to practice the bottom part of that, the good government guiding principles, which, by the way, when you're watching from home, you see it every time that they take the city manager. You see it over his shoulder, right? So what I found remarkable was if you look at what those standards are, you basically didn't follow any of those standards during that meeting. And it left me with a number of questions. But before I get to that, to the city manager and the city attorney, I was surprised that in the packet, there wasn't the code of ethics or the behavioral standards or anything, which I still don't know that all of the council members have read, much less tried to follow, but they weren't in the packet. It really seemed to me that, and I hope you did this, I hope that you tried to dissuade whoever was pushing that item on that agenda that night, that you guys were not ready to have this discussion. And it's one of the reasons why I said to Chair Jane, I didn't think that an independent ethics commission was the right thing to do right now. The right thing to do right now is to go back and use the tools that already exist, right? And to not allow, and this, with Mr. City Attorney, the thing that surprised me at the beginning of this was, as various people were slandering me and the previous program, you didn't interrupt and say, please don't slander someone from the dais. The other thing that I thought was a missed opportunity was for the council and Mr. City Attorney and City Manager to let the 1,250 staff people know that you are providing ethical leadership from the top of the organization, because I think after the year that the staff has had here, they really need to know that this stuff matters. And maybe you've done it privately, but not in public. So I think there were missed opportunities. Yes, I've actually been writing about it, and I think I'm going to start a blog to report on what happens here about ethics. I'm done, except that the Silicon Valley Voice didn't cover anything about that meeting, that part of the meeting.
Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak on this online?
We have someone online, Chair Jean.
Okay.
Wanda. Wanda, can you hear us?
Yes, Wanda Bach. I'm extremely disappointed that at the council meeting, and also considering including the public offering by our city at a prior governance meeting on his ethical ideas, all morphed into an ethical training session. And I wonder about those who want to avoid a full review and changes. Is it a power issue, fear, guilt, or something else? stating this council is unable to trust the legal system, DA, or the very honorable Markula Center says quite a bit more about the council than those entities. It appears a sad situation and no way to run our city. The reason I heard at council for not moving forward on this issue, reasons appeared weak, almost verbatim. It's useless. People are either honest or they aren't. Let the voters decide. Too much money and need to investigate more using staff. And I ask you to ask yourselves if this is the best our elected council members can do for our citizens ethically, or could you please consider doing more and looking at this again? Thank you.
Okay, are there any other members of the public?
No one else online.
Okay, I have a question of staff. At the council meeting, when we talked about this, we talked about creating a special commission. Was direction given to staff to have a special meeting to review AB 1234 as well as our code of ethics and our statement of values?
Chair Jane, I do believe that that is correct.
We will be reviewing our code of ethics and our statement of values at that special meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, there was a request to review those. I'm not sure that it was specifically stated at a special meeting, but it was stated that staff were to prepare a training on AB 123, as well as discuss ethics at that meeting. The planning for that is ongoing right now. And I think the city attorney at that meeting also provided a substantial summary of his plans to enhance how the city provides the ABC 123 or 1234 training.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, City Manager Grogan, I've even got an update on that. On the agenda today of the AB 1234, training, at the end of today's agenda, if you could certainly move it up and I could present it at any time.
Okay, very good. Yes, Member Gilmore.
City Manager, you said the council voted to do the training AB 1234, which is something we do, every year anyway, every 2 years? I don't know, but it's mandated, which we do anyway. You said there's going to be a discussion of ethics. What does that mean? Because I don't remember hearing a discussion of ethics at all at that. So what does that mean, discussion of ethics?
Sure. This came up via public comment, and so I want to be very clear. I have not reviewed the meeting right before coming in here, and so I don't want to say anything and have someone say, aha, that's not exactly what was said. I will tell you from my memory what I believe the direction was and what we're working on. It is to hold the AB 123 training, as well as to have for staff to go back and look at our ethics program and to provide a forum where the city council can discuss the ethics program. And as a part of the AB 123 training talks about ethics. And so in our staff conversations, we were preparing to include a conversation on ethics with that training, depending on the outcomes of our evaluation of where we are with the current ethics program. Mayor, as you'll recall, there are components of the program that were sunsetted. There are components of the program that are outdated in that there are things that are reflective on our website, or that when we had this discussion were on our website that are no longer being done. We need to take a holistic, fresh look at it. And based on that assessment, we may have some additional recommendations to come before council. So I certainly would say that the conversation around ethics, both at the governance Committee, Governance and Ethics Committee, as well as the council is not over. Even though a majority of the city council decided not to move forward with creating an independent ethics committee.
You have a comment? Okay. All right, that concludes public presentations. Now let's move on to general business. The item number 2, approve proposed amendment to council policy 035, naming of facilities. The staff have.
Sure. We do have one slide to bring up on the screen, but as a way of background, at your meeting on March 13th of this year, the committee approved amendments to this council policy 035 with regard to naming of facilities. This item is being brought back to you tonight before going to the city council to discuss one potential addition. And if we can turn to the next slide. Your current policy, as reviewed on March 13th, lists a number of criteria by which facilities could be renamed. They're listed on the screen there. The first one was in recognition of individuals living or deceased who have made outstanding contributions to the city or the community. Individuals living or deceased who have made contributions of local, state, national, or worldwide significance. Honoring the important contributions and accomplishments of individuals from underrepresented communities. Opportunities to foster a more welcoming, equitable, and inclusive environment, as well as to reflect and connect the city's diverse community. Or for their geographic location, demographic information, prominent environmental features of the area in the building or facility. We are proposing to add one additional criteria, and that more or less is for financial benefit. And so it reads, naming rights agreement. Agreements may provide a financial benefit to the city with sponsorship or naming rights agreement for city-owned facilities which aligns to the city's mission and values. That is admittedly a little broad, but the concept is to allow within your specific criteria staff to bring forward a naming rights agreement for a general city facility. Best one to think about is our convention center. We do not know if the city will undertake a naming rights agreement with the convention center, but as your policy was proposed, it was not allowed. It was not specifically listed as financial benefit being a criteria. And we just wanted to add that criteria so that if the city endeavors to have a naming rights agreement for any of your city-owned facilities, we can bring that to you. And it would go through the process that is already outlined in the policy, which is the proposal would come to the Governance and Ethics Committee, this committee right here, and then it will go to the City Council for approval. So it's not changing anything about the process or transparency. It's literally just providing the ability to name a facility for financial benefit. End of the report.
Any questions from my colleagues? Yes, Member Chahal.
Thank you. Thank you, City Manager. So this will be like most of our naming as of today is basically sort of permanent, perpetual, right? But this will not be, this will be time bound, because that's my first question. We want to clarify that this will be time bound. Let's say somebody take the naming rights for convention center, as you mentioned, only for 3 years, right? So this is only for 3 years. My second question is, will we be going to an RFQ process that this has been decided that city's convention center needs naming rights for advertisement purposes, just a Levi's Stadium, basically. So will that be an RFQ process? And everybody should be able to bid on that. Thank you.
Sure. Let me first state that no decision by the council has been made to rename the convention center. This change, absolutely. For example, absolutely there would be a RFQ process or a proposal process where various individuals would be invited to submit bids. And so we would certainly have to go through that. Your other question is, would it be time limited? Potentially. Typically, naming rights agreements do have a defined financial commitment, maybe with other criteria, but for a set amount of time. But this policy does not provide additional criteria that would come to this committee and then the council as the specific facility comes before the city.
Specific to particular facility, then we write down the criteria. Okay, this is criteria for this facility, and that will be coming to council for approval. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, city manager, let's say, for instance, we wanted to name the convention center during the World Cup year, 2026. I could see that being maybe a short-term sort of naming opportunity, although I don't know what the documents say with FIFA or the other about naming facilities. That would be questionable, although we haven't agreed to anything, so we can do what we want right now. But I could see a short-term, but typically naming facilities are longer-term arrangements because of the signage, the cost, and all those types of things. But really, putting RFPs out is all that is fine. We might have to hire someone to go out and solicit, especially during that 2026 year. I just know that when we went through Super Bowl back in 2015 or 16, Super Bowl 50, we were looking for opportunities to make money for the city because having the Super Bowl in itself didn't get direct income into our general fund. So one of the things we looked at was having billboards out in that area that we could, because those actually make a lot of money for the owners, but it ended up not panning out and didn't work out. But anytime we can do advertising opportunities for us during that short period of window we might be looking at a short-term arrangement and then a longer-term arrangement. But I would be open to both at this point, both the short-term and the long-term.
City manager, I had some questions. It says facilities. I assume that means renaming of streets as well. Okay. And then this is controversial. The ICC has a name and history and everything else, but we're in a real financial bind in terms of rebuilding that. Do you have any thoughts about what would happen with the ICC?
I think you're talking about the International Swim Center.
ISC, yeah.
ISC, yes. I want to be very clear.
Yeah.
This is to amend the policy to allow for a naming rights agreement that has a financial benefit component that is just not sort of an honorarium. Did not come here today prepared to talk about a specific naming rights of the convention center or our International Swim Center. I understand the sentiment. Know that staff has not done any work with regard to a renaming of the International Swim Center. I understand the comments that you've just made and the potential financial benefit that it could create under the right circumstances. Whether those circumstances are present today or will be in the future, I cannot answer that right now.
Any comments by members of the public on this?
One thought that immediately came to mind, and you would come up with the criteria, but I was thinking the Jed York Convention Center, right? Or naming something after the family who owned the 49ers would be probably very financially wonderful, but for the public and all of the stuff about how the York family is buying the city and so forth, I think you don't want to do that.
Any other members of the public? Anyone online?
No hands raised online.
Okay, any discussion? A motion?
So
Member Chahal.
that raises a question or a suggestion, basically. So that also brings it like we have a investment policy, right? And we deter some, okay, this type of investment we'll be investing into for our funds, city funds or corporate funds, right? And I know we don't have a clear policy on that, like take an example, fossil fuel, or we can take some other general example where we would not like a particular type of industry to be advertised, let's say a tobacco industry for that matter. So I hope we will put that thing in our details somewhere that as a general rule, some of these will be deterred so that we don't end up in a RFQ, somebody raise a question, hey, we are a business too, we are a corporate too. Why did you eliminate us from this RFQ process? So I understand we are talking very initial, but I'm just raising that point so that we can include something like this, that we have a right to deny a particular corporate house on the naming rights because of the general policy of the city, which is long-term beneficial to the economics as well as to the general sustainability or whatever aspect we think for the city.
Absolutely. How the policy is configured is the policy says that aligns with the city's mission and values. We will certainly build in specific criteria in any RFP or proposal process that we go through. In addition, know that staff would not recommend anything that we didn't think aligned to our general mission and values. But there will be at least two public opportunities, one here at the committee for the committee to assess if staff is coming forward with a recommendation, does it actually align, and at the city council. And so there will be plenty of opportunities for that assessment.
Okay, Member Gilmore.
I was just gonna say, we should have discretion in this because even though someone may fit all the bids particulars, it may not be ethical to put their name on a building or, doesn't fit with, our values, which are, my values may be different than the chair's values. So our values that's sort of up in the air at this point, but, it's just something that, we'd have to listen to the public and see what makes sense for us. But we have, of course, the discretion without naming reasons that may be obvious, but we have discretion, so. And which has happened in every naming situation when we are faced with the name of a park or a building. We've always had discretion. And some names that have come in that I'm, in the past that I thought, wow, we've never put that name on a building, but they still came in. So, so yes, it would be the same here. I mean, I'm not thinking that there would be a ton of, interest in this, but there might be some for the special occasions, for instance, the World Cup and the Super Bowl because of that area. But we'd have to do that like now, right now. All right, thank you. Was there a motion?
There's no motion yet.
I'll make a motion
What is the motion? Staff's recommendation?
to approve the proposed amendment to Council Policy 035, naming of facilities.
Second by Member Chahal. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Now we move on to item number 3, 2024 Council Priority Session Framework. Is there a presentation?
Yes, there's a presentation and staff will bring that up now. Hi again, Javon Grogan, City Manager, Chair Jane, Member Jahal and Gilmore, members of the public. We are excited to present a framework for a new priority setting process before the committee today with the plan that if it is approved today, it would go to the City Council at the September 19th meeting. Our agenda for this presentation is we will discuss a little bit of the background of the city's priority setting process. We will provide an overview of the process. We will then discuss a draft 3-day framework of your priority setting process. It is, I think, a little bit more robust, if you will, than a prior processes, and we'll talk about that. And then 4, we will discuss a process for setting annual work plans for your boards, commissions, and committees. As we go to the next slide, just at a very high level, Santa Clara, like many cities, has a history of developing and setting an annual set of priorities for the organization, and also priority initiatives, or in many ways, those are projects that align to the larger priority areas or focus areas. The city council last had its priority setting session where it adopted a set of priorities on February 1st and 2nd of 2001. You did meet again last year on February 8th. However, the city council decided not to adjust or amend priorities at that time because of transition in management. And I can attest that I know council members and the public are really interested in priority setting. And so in addition, while not explicitly related to council priorities, we did want to note that the Santa Clara City Council has not historically had a priority setting process for your annually for the work plans for your what we're calling CBCs, commissions, boards, and committees. We want to propose one, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And so if we go to the next slide, the general timeline that we are proposing is to essentially, upon your review today, if you approve and the city council approves at the September 19th meeting, we would launch this process this year. And we would begin to immediately develop a community survey with the goal of launching that in November and December of this year, really to reach out to the community and say, your city council will be meeting to decide the priorities for this organization. Please give us your thoughts and really have a robust public engagement process. We then would have that process with the city council between February and April of 2024. While it is a 3-day process, as we will discuss, that is really broken up, and there is time in between those days for substantial work by the staff and analysis based on your direction. And then after the adoption of your council priorities, we would then have a process where we review and set the annual work plan for all 10 of your advisory bodies. And those really will tier from your priorities. And so if we can go to the next slide. We wanted to begin this discussion knowing that all of this will be amended or discussed and potentially amended when we have the priority setting process. But we wanted to begin with just a discussion on what is a priority area. And so we are proposing a draft definition, again, not for your approval here today, but just a little ground setting for our conversation. So a priority area is a particular area of organizational focus for the city of Santa Clara's government, as defined by the council on an annual basis. They can and do change over time based on interests, needs, and resources, both oftentimes people resources or financial resources. And they're not, while they're listed 1 to 7, they are not listed in any order of priority or preference. Your last council priority areas or pillars that they're often also referred to were, as I said before, adopted in 2001, and that was to deliver and enhance high quality, efficient services and infrastructure, manage strategically our workforce capacity and resources, promote and enhance economic, housing, and transportation development, enhance community sports, recreation, and art assets, enhance compliance with Measure J and manage Levi Stadium, enhance community engagement and transparency, and promote sustainability and environmental protection. Really high-level goals that really need something or specific projects underpinning them. And as you know, when we do our budget development process and when we come to the city council and staff reports, we always link back to these focus areas because it really is you as a governing body saying, this is what we think are most important for the organization to focus on. Next, we wanted to talk about what is a priority initiative. It's important to do a little pause point so we know what we're discussing. A priority initiative is a specific effort that must align to one or more of the council's priority areas. It requires a level of work that is above normal. And that's why you have the iceberg image there, because everything that we do on a day-to-day basis is really below the surface. It's running a efficient government that provides high-quality services to the community. But your directives and the policies that you set, the focus areas and your initiatives, it's above the surface, right? It's purposely stretching our capacity because we have the governing body saying these are high priority things and we really want you to concentrate on them. And priority initiatives is not meant to be a laundry list of things that the organization is already doing, right? It's purposely meant to be things that council is asking the organization to focus on. They oftentimes are the type of projects that require direct leadership and guidance from the city manager, the city attorney, or our department directors. Often, distinguished from the type of project that would be assigned to an analyst, the analyst or a mid-level manager would accomplish. These are higher level projects. Also important to note that some of the initiatives can be accomplished in an annual cycle or 1 year, but others are multi-year efforts. And that's important to talk about at the outset, because when we look at our priority initiatives and we report on our successes, if we didn't accomplish everything, it's important to note, well, that item was never supposed to be accomplished this year. It was purposely or from the beginning going to be a multi-year effort. The next slide talks about our process overview and what we aim to achieve with the city council in our 3-day process. And it actually can be summarized in an image. We really want to take all of the things that we have heard, new suggestions, and filter those down to what are going to be the few council adopted priority initiatives. And so we know that there will at least be 6 categories that will make up the things that you may adopt, and they're listed there in the round circles. First is our public suggestions, so things that come from the public survey. We will, if you approve, conduct that survey, analyze the results, summarize the results, and have a robust discussion with you on what the public thinks that you should tell the organization through your directives to focus on. We already have a list of current priorities or current initiatives that we're working on, some of which are complete and we'll report on that. But we need to take a look at the current initiatives and have you say, as the governing body, do you want to continue all of those, right? If we haven't had the capacity to start on one, do you want us to pause on that and say, you know what, that's important, but it's no longer important for 2024. We really want you to concentrate on this other thing. We will look at existing referrals. I think in my brief tenure here, we don't always think about council referrals as a priority, but oftentimes council does refer some pretty substantial policies at a regular meeting, whether it be a comment from the public or an idea that comes up that's related to another topic we're talking about. You will often have the city council say, hey, let's refer that to staff. Those things oftentimes take significant workload, and we need to talk about those and make sure that we're appropriately resource loading the organization and setting expectations. Staff suggestions, we will have suggestions not quite done. We will have suggestions from staff. We will also have potential November 24 ballot items. We've talked a lot about potentially having a ballot, a capital bond or another measure on the November ballot. And so that will take a significant amount of staff capacity and be a focus or a stretch for the organization, and we need to reflect that, as well as new ideas from council members. And so all 6 of those, and potentially a 7th, we will discuss and distill down, hopefully arriving at a set of priority initiatives for 24. If we go to the next slide, I'll talk about really quickly a draft schedule. This will change. It's being provided just to provide the city council with a potential flow of what day 1 would be. We would have an opening with a facilitator and an icebreaker. We will review the process and our goals. But our first major agenda item would be reviewing the summary of community input that we've received, already analyzed by staff and categorized. We would then undertake a review of all of your current priorities, updating council on completed items, and we will also include in that discussion a review of all of your existing referrals. We then will close out day one by reconciling everything that we've talked about and prepare or I'm sorry, I skipped the recommendations from staff. On day one, we will also present the recommendations from staff. Then we will close out that meeting and go to day two. Day two, we will have a welcome. We will review the potential 2024 ballot measures and timelines. This is again for the November ballot, potentially a capital bond or other measure. We would then have what I'm sure will be a robust discussion on the prioritization and voting process. And the goal there is to, in day two, talk about and hopefully decide on what process we will use in day three when council will actually vote on what those priorities will be. Some cities do a simple majority. Any priority that gets a majority vote will land on the list. The challenge with that is sometimes the majority can ensure that the minority doesn't have anything on the list. And so we will talk about potentially other items using a weighted average or potentially a process where we ensure that every council member or every district gets something on the priority list, or everyone gets one or two things on the priority list. And so there are various mechanisms, but we want to spend significant time on day two processing through how you will arrive at your final list. We then will go through individual council selection from all of the things that we talked about, those 6 categories. I won't repeat them. And then we'll have a summary and figure out exactly where we land at the end of day two. And then in between day 2 and day 3, staff will do some analysis. So the goal of day 2 is to actually walk away with a little bit of a shorter list. On the board, we envision potentially 35. It may be, that number may change because we had every council member selecting an initial 5 that would be studied. But the plan for, as we go into day 3, next slide, is staff would analyze each of those. And we would return to you on day 3 with a initial review of everything that you selected. We would review and confirm your voting procedures. We would then present to you staff's analysis of each of those items. If it requires a budget adjustment, we want to let you know. We've analyzed it. We think that this item will cost approximately X and will take Y. So that you're provided, at least at a very high level, with the information you need to make a decision on if you want that to be a priority for the organization in 2024. And then we will process to what will be your discussion and deliberation on a final set of priorities. Purposely, on the draft, we have not said exactly how many priorities we will land with. The number isn't as important as the amount of workload that each of them take, right? You could have 50, but if we could do them in the same amount of workload that we have to do 20 very comprehensive ones. So we're not concentrated on the number, we're concentrated on the work that it's going to take to get them done. And so that would conclude day 3. And then in closing out this conversation, again, after you develop and set your council priority areas and the initiatives under that, we would like to embark on an annual work plan setting process for all of your CBCs, commissions, boards, and committees. While you have 11 advisory bodies, we have not included the salary setting commission for obvious reasons, and one that you would adopt their workload for. But all of the others, we would undertake a process where each CBC, supported by their staff member, would submit a draft work plan. Staff would analyze that for, again, budgetary and time expectations. And then we would have a process where the city council reviews, deliberates, and adopts. And so the plan there is, so each of your advisory bodies on an annual basis would have a work plan that really tiers from the city council, and it tiers from your leadership and guidance, connecting back to those priority areas of focus that you have said are important for the organization for that year. That concludes our presentation. I am here and staff is here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Any comments from my colleagues? Questions, comments? Member Gilmore.
Thank you. Thank you for that. When you're talking 3 days, are you talking 3 full days? 3 full days?
I certainly hope they're not full days and 8-hour days, but I do think that they are 3 substantial days, potentially at least 4 hours apiece. But again, punctuated by several weeks in between, because there will be substantial staff work that needs to be done to support council.
Well, I've been through probably at least a dozen different types of goal settings with the city from, I think that was one of the initial ones where we just get like dots and we put the dots on the things that we like, and people put all their dots on one thing. And from that to, I think we had 3-day goal settings at the convention center with city manager Santana, and it was really extensive. Started with each committee, each department came and gave a report on what was happening in their department. And although that was really eye-opening and very interesting for the public, it took a long time. But it was one of those things where we learned a lot about what was going on in the city. So that's fine if we're going to do it 3 days. You said it's all separate because I have another job too. So I'm just wondering, do I have to take 3 days off in a row or? Okay, all right, that makes sense. I had a question about our commissions, and I think you clarified it at the end, because each of our commissions they create their own work plans every year. And I don't want to dictate what their work plan is. I want them to be able to have the freedom as commissioners, that we trust them to come up with their work plan, and maybe we adopt it or a version of it, but I don't want their work plan to come from us. I think I want to make that my comments about that, because I trust that they know what's going on better than we do in each of their commissions. So all these things are fine. I agree with the follow-up, and again, City Manager Santana had really a phenomenal way of following up on each of the goals that we did and how they related to the first topic, but it was just she would give us so much information, but we have to follow, we spend a lot of time making these goals. They have to be followed as to what's happening so we can track them. So I agree with that. You may want to look at that example of what she did as well. But this is all well and good, but at the end of the day, we always had the finances and what money is available for these 30 goals or whatever you think we're going to come out of this. And for the last several goal sessions, we've had a number of, all right, for new programs, we have, this amount of money available, because some of the goals that were coming out of council members were, multi-million dollar, if not hundreds of millions of dollar goals. So I don't want to waste anyone's time at these goal setting sessions. I want us to all be realistic about what's available financially for us to be able to give you the goals that are necessary, and how much money we're actually working with at the end of the day that's available. And I think it was the last couple ones, we didn't have a whole lot of money available to allocate. It was a few $100,000. So what's going to be available this time as well? And it helps keep us focused and in perspective, because the important thing about these sessions is that we stay focused and aren't, going in 100 different directions. So that's going to be important for me. Thanks. Can you answer?
Chair. Sure. Just a couple quick follow-ups. So as noted in the staff report, in the budget, we have $250,000 allocated for work on all the priorities, right? You could have one priority that uses that entire amount and more. Part of the reason why staff will be recommending potential priority initiatives is because there are things that will align to a council member or the city council's goal that may be a low cost, high benefit. And we want the ability to be able to recommend those to the council, knowing that we may not have the financial resources for that goal that is several $100,000 or several $1 million, but yet we can still make an impact on council's larger priority area. And so we will certainly in the staff recommendations be looking for those sort of low cost, high impact initiatives or recommendations. And I would say that I totally agree that as a city, we still very much have a financial challenge whether we have end-of-year savings or not. Our capital infrastructure is woefully underfunded. And any one-time monies, we really will be looking toward spending those on our major capital assets and recommending that to council. And so we do need to be mindful of when we talk about priority initiatives, we don't look at one-time money and try and create a ongoing program. And so we will certainly be having those conversations.
I think that's really important for the public to know that when we're talking about these goals, are we going to be able to achieve them? I mean, I want to be upfront and transparent when we're having this session, that I don't want them to come away with thinking that we're going to have, you know, these 25 things that we're going to do when we're not. I want to be honest with them going forward, that this is what we think we can achieve right now. And I know that our public is really, they're really thirsting for us to get things done, because we've been unstable in the last couple of years. And now that we're trying to get back on track, we need to start showing them that we can get things done. So I think a lot of those things you talked about, where they might be low cost but high benefit projects, I'm going to be interested in, so that we can show the city that we're working. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Member Chahal.
Thank you, Chair. So I have some similar comments, and one thing, I know we are spreading these days 1, 2, 3 into a different, probably weeks or within a couple of months. May I suggest, like, can we put it session 1, session 2? Because day 1, day 2, day 3, anybody, oh, okay, this is today, tomorrow, and day after. So if we can, just for general public, if we can divide it into session 1, session 2, session 3. And I'm hoping that is being covered right now. Our goal is to cover these 3 sessions between February and April. Yeah, is that correct?
So it will be our goal to have each of the 3 days between February and April of '24. I do have to say that having several weeks in between each day is almost critical to the success of supporting your policymaking. I totally understand for the public, if they were sequential, they may be easier to attend and follow. But what I want to make sure that we do as we set up the process is we give staff enough time to support you. And so if a council member has an idea, we want to have enough time to analyze that at a very, very high level in order to bring back to you a recommendation and information that will allow you to make an informed decision on if maybe it's a wonderful idea, but you know what? It's not within our financial ability to do, or we can spend a lot of time studying it, but it still won't be in our financial time to do, right? Sometimes it's easy, it's relatively low cost to study, but the final implementation, you don't have the money for. And so we want to make sure that we have enough time so you can, as a elected policymaker, inform us, and then we can go back, do a little work, and come back to you before your final decision.
No, I completely agree. When I was saying session 1, session, I don't want them to be consecutive. I want that with a great feedback from the staff, because we don't want answers from you by next day. Okay, no, is this doable or not doable? You can't. You have to contact 3 different department heads and come back. So I really like that idea of spreading it out. But I'm saying is, that's why I'm saying instead of day 1, day 2, day 3, let's put it session 1, session 2, session 3. So that naming of all that only, they basically, yeah. And my next question is groundwork by the staff. I know Mayor Gilmore touched that, like if we, on the initial introduction of this meeting, if you can give us some broader parameters, hey, this is the flexibility of the budget we have, basically. Ground rules for all the council members, they know, okay, this is the best. Yeah, there can be a very visionary idea which we may not make it happen right away, but I'm not deterring that to be presented. But some ground rule, like this is the flexibility we have within the budget, this is the flexibility we have within our staff to implement something. That would be really good as a basically the very first time at the intro to the plan. That will not waste time. Like if I have an idea which is not doable and I'm still pushing it forward, and your ground rule tell me that, hey, this is not doable. So why waste the time on that? Some basic ground rule, right? I'm not throwing out any visionary ideas. We should discuss about those, but they can just be noted down for future, right? Flexibility, there's like we had $250,000 from our previous priority setting, which we did not use it. And that's the flexibility we need if that budget can be increased more, because look at the COVID scenario, like it came up on us and we did not have anything to do. So flexible, the reason I'm adding that flexibility in between let's say we finalize everything and in between we come across with something. Let's take an example of International Swim Center. If there is a priority for that and we have money for that, we should bring that in, and we should leave some flexibility on those parts. Like, okay, even beyond these priority goal settings, there is an option for something to be brought for. It's not a watertight compartment that we are not bringing anything other than. I know staff does not do that, but add that as a basic ground rule that, yeah, we can look into something like that down the line. Yeah. Other than that, staff commission work plans. So basically, are we talking about all the commissions have their work plan? They have to approve their work plans, right? So we will be acting upon their work plans, or are we suggesting or basically making all the work plan for them? I hope that's the first one, that we are working on their work plans.
Yes, with a caveat. I think one, it's important to know that the bodies are advisory to you as the city council. Two, the process begins with them recommending a work plan. And I think in both the staff report and the presentation, we use different terms. At some point we said adopted it, at another point we said confirm. And I think that was staff really having not settled on the discussion we're having here, but totally wanting to reflect that it's more of a confirmation versus a adoption, right? The work plan really begins from the committee. So what you get will come from the committee. Yes, it will be informed by their staff liaison and they will work with the staff liaison. But absolutely, I think the mayor spoke to this too, just making sure that as policy leaders, you appoint people to your advisory bodies and you're appointing them for a specific reason, right? And you want them to have the ability to suggest things. But we do want to bring that to the city council for a discussion and make sure that it aligns with where you want to go as a body.
On that, if I may suggest, I know we always approve the commission and committees minutes every meeting, basically. Sometimes the commissions have very specific request, and that request is directly targeted to the council. So if we can sort that special request and put in notice of council, hey, this is the special request which commission has come up with, whether it's a new idea or something, for communication purposes for the council, that would be good. I know it's not on the topic, but I just my head. That special request from the commissions or the committee should be directed to the council in a much more transparent way, that hey, this is a special request which they're asking council for.
Totally understand that. I haven't seen that in my brief tenure, but I'll look out for that. I would say that part of the goal in having a annual work plan setting process is to reduce some of those mid-year requests to do X and do Y, and to have take the committee through a process at the beginning of the year where they develop their work plan, it goes to council. Really, they have their goals and objectives. Similar to staff, right? Sometimes when the goals and objectives are constantly changing, we have a hard time accomplishing the things that you've already said. And so I totally understand, to the extent that a board or commission has a new request or something that they're asking the council for, we need to make sure that we highlight that in a fashion where you see it and it's transparent. And then this process is to eliminate some of those annual mid-year requests.
Thank you.
Okay, I had some questions here. I know we have these overarching, what we call council pillars. Will we be discussing those as well as part of this process? Because I didn't see fiscal responsibility highlighted explicitly. And for number 6, I personally would like to see that change to enhance community engagement, trust, and transparency. So anyway, those are things that we will be discussing. I'm glad to see that. On the agendas, the draft schedules, I would like to see, I don't see it explicit here, but periodically, probably every 2 hours during these meetings, we have a time certain for public input, or public presentation. I know in the past, we made sure that we had one opportunity in the morning and one in the afternoon. Wasn't always time certain, but public can't be there for the whole time sometimes. And then, as the mayor had said, for the audit committee, we had a list of activities that our consultants wanted to do, and they listed this activity, this many hours, and we knew that we had a total of like 2,700 hours that we could allocate. So we reshuffled some of those times just to stay within the 2,700 hours, but changing some of the priorities. So again, having some reality check of our finances is important to me. And finally, for the work plans, I believe the council actually approves the work plans on council agendas, but I've heard from committee members that sometimes the work plans actually come from staff and they have very little discretion as to how to adjust those work plans. So I like the idea of having sort of a process similar to what the council is going through, where members of those committees could suggest blue sky ideas for their committees, and then have the staff sort of sanity check the workloads for those programs. Otherwise, I like the idea that they're spread out because staff has quite a bit of research to do between the meetings. And finally, my question is about the schedule, because we're going to be setting these priorities in April, but in May, we're going to get the budget. So it gets very tight there to say that we're going to then be setting these priorities and then committing money into the budget. So is there enough time for staff to roll those into the budget?
Potentially. I think we've talked about budget a couple times. I want to start by saying it is important to separate a council priority setting process from a budget allocation process, right? The goal of engaging the council in a policy level conversation on what the priorities of the organization should be looks a lot different than saying we have X pot of money to spend on new projects, initiatives, ideas. How much do we have to spend? Let's allocate, right? And so a priority setting process, and some of the ones that I've been a part of, and both as a consultant and as an employee, actually begins a little bit more on the balcony, right? You begin on the balcony to say, as the governing body, what's most important to you? You don't begin with how much money you have to allocate. Certainly, there will be initiatives that will cost money to study. We may need a consultant. The final implementation of that may cost money, but the study doesn't. We will grapple with all of that. And the city may have additional one-time funds to apply, but I just want to say at a high level, the goal is not begin with a certain pot of money and allocate those to various initiatives. And so I know we will have this discussion, and I think during the process, we need to make sure that we are both supporting you, but not allowing or not having the process turn into a budgetary discussion, because we will be, as you noted, at the same time reviewing the draft budget and preparing to adopt that right around the same time.
Okay, thank you. Any other, yes, Member Gilmore.
Thank you. Just to follow up what the city manager just said, I think the financial component, it should be part of it, but not driving it, because I think we need that to keep us focused and on task with these goal setting sessions, because I've been through so many of them. They get off target, and just, we need to think about money so we don't present hundreds of millions of dollars projects that we can't spend time talking about that when it's not feasible for us right now. But I wanted to say, I asked that the dinners be brought back with the commissions. I think we have our senior dinner tomorrow. Is it tomorrow, right? So I've always asked on these dinners that the commissions bring their work plan to talk to us about it. So it gives us the opportunity to look at the with each commission and let them explain their work plan to us. And I know we'll get a few in now. What we're in September, so we're doing one a month. So we'll get a few commissions in before April or February, at least so they can discuss their work plan. So that's an opportunity. If the commissions have something that they need us to vote on, they'll send in their minutes and action item that goes on the council agenda. That's how they work it. If it's something that they want us to vote on, that's what they've done in the past. Yes, time for public, of course, lots of time in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. That's what we've done in the past. And food, you have to have food, so the public will come, and they will come if there's food, and good food, not just little, goldfish snacks. Yes, because the better the food, the more people come. We've had it at the convention center in the past. I'm gonna ask, where we have it, so it's just a little bit different than here, whether it's convention center, whether it's at maybe Central Park Library, some kind of out of school, somewhere that's easy for people to get. Maybe we have one at the Northside Library, and then Central, and then somewhere in the South or City Hall. But I think we should vary the locations as well and vary the times to make it easier for people to attend. And when we start, we have a synopsis or a little summary of what happened at the previous meeting to jog all of our memories. Because if there's going to be weeks in between each, just a summary.
Members of the public?
A suggestion, the resident feedback surveys in 2006, 2007, and 2008. And they have really good questions. And what I'd encourage you to do, include some of the questions about public trust. Critics keep saying, oh, you have a public trust problem. Well, you can find out if you do or if you don't. And the other thing with that, I was thinking, was the needs of the staff. I don't know that the city has ever done a trust or ethics survey of the staff. And those exist. Joanne Spears, who I mentioned, has created those when she was at the League of California Cities Institute for Local Government. And so there's a lot of that stuff. You know that there's a lot of that, but that would be an area where it would be helpful. It could actually shut up some of the people who are critics saying you have public trust problems if you don't.
So I really like the idea of the moonshot. I think there should be space for that so that you guys can actually talk about some of your lofty ideas for the city. I think, if you don't talk about those, you're mired in the tactical and the reactionary, and you don't really plan stuff out. And so all the visionary stuff that you guys like to see in cities never actually happens because you never talk about it. So when you're putting this kind of energy into it, you should leave some time for those moonshot ideas. I really hope you do that. And I would like to mention highlight the elephant in the room, that ethics was not even on the priorities. I think it was a kind of a given, which is why it wasn't there. I'm giving the city the benefit of the doubt why it's not on there. But I think that should be there. And in order for it to be there, there has to be agreement that there is an ethics and credibility problem. And I don't think I've heard this council agree on that. And I think this is the place to discuss it, at the very least, this meeting, to talk about whether you think there's an ethics problem in the city. And if you don't think there is, you should go on the record and say that, because I think there's a misunderstanding on, I think maybe there is some agreement about an ethics problem in the city and a public trust. But if you can't admit the problem, then you can't fix the problem, and it'll never be prioritized. So I do hope you do that. And I really appreciate that both Suds and Mayor pointed out the public comment sections were visibly missing. And I'm sure you meant to put those in, or you knew those were going to be part of there, but that has been a critical part of the process. And so I'm glad you're looking at that. And all the priority sessions I've been to have all been back to back to back, kind of this really high level, really loosey-goosey stuff. The way you're approaching it, City Manager, I think is much more practical and much more real to get something done. So thank you.
Okay, Mayor.
Yes, I think ethics is going to be a big topic of conversation, whether the council wants to talk about it ourselves. I'm certainly going to make it my main focus, because I think that is the main focus of what's happened to our city in the last couple of years. And I plan to bring it up several times. I'm hoping that members of the public bring it up as well. So I think it's going to be a big part of our goal setting discussions. Those are things that don't cost a lot of money, ethics.
Okay, City Manager.
Sure. Just wanted to note that in the schedule that we reviewed, it was purposely meant to be high level. Actually, a prior version of that had public comment, had breaks. We had time associated with each item. I think just for this presentation, we stripped all that sort of normal routine things out and wanted to talk a little bit at a higher level.
Okay, since the mayor and one of the members of the public mentioned this, I'm going to read an email between me and a member of the public. Hello, Kirk. Thank you for being so concerned about ethics in the city of Santa Clara. This is after I spoke to him after a council meeting, and I asked him how often he talked with the mayor, and he said once a week, maybe once a month. I have attached the full extent of the responses to my PRA 23. There's a what? Okay, well, I have attached the full extent of responses to my PRA 23-545, which is now deemed complete by staff. I filed this PRA after this discussion you and I had, where you indicated that you and Mayor Gilmore talk at least once a month, possibly every week. This PRA asked for 2 years of texts and emails, and all I got were 0 texts and a total of 14 emails over 2 years. This is my PRA. I am requesting all emails and texts between Mayor Lisa Gilmore and Kirk Vartan using personal and city-issued devices regarding worker cooperatives, electricity rates, grand jury investigations, parking, city manager, and related Santa Clara between the dates of 5/24/2021 and 5/24/2023. In the PRA, there were 3 emails from you to the full council and 7 emails from you to Lisa alone, and only 2 emails from Lisa. Can you confirm that this is the full extent of written communications between you and Mayor Gilmore over the past 2 years? I've attached the California Code on retention of records for 2 years. Perhaps you can suggest what recourse I might have if I don't believe that all records were produced or that some were deleted. How should the new Ethics Commission handle this complaint? I also looked at Lisa's public calendar and found only the following recorded meetings, which is far fewer than I would expect based on the conversation that you and I had. I've attached a memo from Maria Lay indicating which meetings should be recorded on council member calendars. And what I found was there was approximately, maybe at most one meeting every 6 months
Mr. Chair,
We're recorded.
if I might, I know you were, I believe, invoking a personal privilege there since the topic was brought up, but this subject, while interesting and ethics, I know is an important consideration, is it's really off topic for the agenda item that we've got in front of us. So I just want to note that for you.
Okay, I was responding to comments by the
I need
mayor
to
and-
say something, but that was about me. So, Councilmember Jane, are you trying to say that I'm lying? Is that what you're saying? Because if you are, just say it. Is that what you're saying?
I'm just concerned about,
Oh, you're
ethics all
concerned. Are you
around
trying to
in the
say that
city.
I'm lying? I want to hear you say that
I
because you've
know what I'm s-
PRA'd me with
I don't know
everyone
what
else.
I don't
So,
know what I'm saying here.
so what are you saying, Councilmember
Anyway,
Jane?
I
No,
believe
you
that-
brought this up. What are you saying?
I don't believe that I got all of the records that
So,
were created.
Are you saying I did not put in all the records, that I'm deceitful in some way? Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, appreciate your response to.
No, but
personal
he's made
privilege,
some
but
accusations about me at an ethics meeting
Understood. Yeah, and you've made
That-
your statement too in response. I'd
that I
encourage
have
you both
accurately
to,
submitted all of my records.
I'd
but
encourage you
he
both
has
to
said
move
that
on
I
on
have
the
not.
agenda. Fair response, Madam Mayor and Mr. Chair.
is a
I'd
fair
Encourage you to move on.
response.
We need to move on. Thank you.
Oh, really?
All right.
No ethics here, that's for
So
sure.
Let's, do we have a motion on this, on the priority session?
I'll make a motion to review and provide, to forward 2024 priority setting session framework to council for full consideration.
Is there a second?
I didn't understand what you said, I'm sorry.
Staff's recommendation.
Staff recommendation.
Okay, with all of our comments and all of our additions that you heard with the public presentations, with the breaks, with the food, with the keeping it focused and everything you heard?
We will
Okay.
amend the staff report briefly to note that.
Okay, I'll second that then.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Now we move on to item number 4, action on recommendation on the Governance and Ethics Committee to amend Council Policy 030, adding agenda items on the agenda and forward to the City Council for consideration.
Thank you, Chair Jane, Member Gilmore, and Member Shahal. To the members of the public, Javon Grogan, City Manager, here to discuss this item, which calls for a recommendation of amendments to your Council 030 policy. We do have a PowerPoint that is on the screen now. I will be the primary presenter, but I am backed up by my colleague, the City Attorney, who it's worked hand in hand on this item, and this item really comes to you from jointly by the City Manager's Office and the City Attorney's Office. If we go to the next slide, just wanted to provide a little background and ground setting for what your 030 or 030 policy is. The purpose is to establish a straightforward and effective process for members of the City Council and the public to have their items within the jurisdiction of the City Council placed on the agenda. The current policy provides for the public and council members, it gives them the ability to submit a written request that is heard under the written petition section of a City Council agenda. The public may also address items during public presentations on your City Council meetings. This policy was last amended, on October 27th of 2020 to describe what can be considered at a meeting where the request is made. And it also added a council item request form that I know we use regularly. Next slide. There are a number of proposed changes. We will start by talking about the proposed changes related to council member referrals. One, a proposed change is to formalize the process by which council members consult both the city manager and the city attorney before submitting the written request. That oftentimes happens. This just provides it within the policy. What that also does is that it enables staff to evaluate and provide feedback on the resource requirements, legality and timing and prioritization of the proposed request. What happens now often is the request is generated, it's either turned in or just before it's turned in, staff is provided with, hey, here's my 030. We would like to submit it. This provides for a process where hopefully before that 030 is crafted, there can be a thoughtful exchange with the city manager and the city attorney. Sometimes there appears to be, or there's a time crunch because the 030 is submitted. And so we oftentimes are asking the council member to delay their 030 in order for us to analyze it and get back to them. This hopefully sets up a scenario where before the request is submitted, there's a conversation and some staff work provided before the request is made. But after the consultation, absolutely, council members reserve the right to proceed with their 030 request. The next slide is that it relocates the 030 request proposals to reports of members and special committees on your council agenda, and this is to assist with prioritizing all the important business that you have on your agenda. The updated policy also adds guidance on the limited extent to which 030 items can be presented and discussed, and it provides a summary of the type of actions that council can take. No action, a referral to staff for additional analysis or report in the future, a referral to the council priority setting process, which we talked about, and or agendizing the item at a future meeting. In many ways, all of the options that you have available to you now, just codifying that in the policy. I think if I pause for a minute on the third item, which is referral to a council priority setting process. I think we've actually been doing that more often as of late. Is an important topic comes up and council says, hey, you know what, let's refer that to the priority setting process. One of the things that we will talk about with our priority setting process is after we go through, as we talked about in the prior item, that extensive 3-day process, we want to change that only for important critical items. And so we will talk about at our priority setting how we may address that. In that, I think in talking to a council member, I use the example of a safe routes to schools plan. In that if we have an adopted set of policy initiatives and for whatever reason, we don't have a safe routes to schools plan in there, this policy provides for a council member to approach the city manager or city attorney and say, hey, you know what? I know we adopted our council priorities in February, but I really think we need to do a safe routes to schools plan. Staff will say, okay, you know what? I know this is coming from one council member and the full council needs to provide guidance on that. Know that that is probably a 6-month project costing X. And then the council member would submit their 030. Staff will have had the time to potentially provide significant input at that meeting, or say, you know what, council member came, discussed this item. If you adopt this item, it will adjust this priority or that priority. We may need to delay this other thing that you approved in February, but should you decide to do this, we are all set to readjust priorities. But what we really want to do is link any major changes back to your council priorities at all times. On the next slide, we talk about proposed changes from requests from the public. And so the proposed policy that you have before you summarizes the various ways that the public can petition the city for action. They include verbal or written communications to city staff. As you know, there are multiple ways for the public to submit things. It's not just email. There's our citizen response app. There are all of our phone numbers, as well as all of the various departmental social media accounts and various inputs. There's verbal or written communications to yourself or the 3 of you plus your other colleagues as the elected leaders for the organization. There's appearing both live in person or by Zoom at a council meeting under public presentation. And as we talked about, they could also engage in our annual priority setting process, and not just the robust survey that we want to develop, but also those public comment periods that we talked about just a few minutes ago. On the next slide, we discuss a few other potential changes that are being proposed for requests from the public. A written petition. The written petition process is proposed to be considered under public presentations on the agenda. That has the added benefit of bringing it up. As you know now, your 030 requests come at the very end of the meeting. Oftentimes, that is very late, and the mayor or council members are asking to move that up. This will put those requests from the public more front and center at the beginning of the meeting. During the public presentations portion, the public may request that the council refer an item to staff or place the item on discussion at a future council meeting. That oftentimes happens now. But because the item is not on the agenda, the council really has a few options. You can refer the item to staff, or if the item is urgent, the city attorney has opined that it would be appropriate for council to request that the proposal be agendized at an upcoming meeting for consideration. And so again, it is still allowing the public to suggest something that they feel is very important to the governing body, and it's allowing the governing body to say, you know what, as a council member, I think this is important. I'd like to refer this to staff, or and seek concurrence from your colleagues, or say, I would like this to be agendized at the next meeting. And so it is very much in the spirit of what happens now. Lastly, as noted on the slide, if upon hearing a petition for action by a member of the public, one or more member of the council members may desire to sponsor the request themselves, and they can use the 030 process that is available for council members to carry that item forward. Also worth noting that a council member can do that whether the public comes to the meeting and suggests it, or you're hearing from any member of the public during your normal day-to-day interactions. So staff's recommendation is that the committee approve the revised 030 policy subject to any further amendments that you may agree to, and recommend that it go to the full council for consideration and approval. That concludes our report.
City Manager, do any of my colleagues have any? Member Gilmore.
Okay, so I worked on this 030 policy way back when, because we had a council member at the time that was going to department heads in the city, and he was very aggressive and asking the department heads, city attorney's office, others to create ordinances for him and do things without the full blessing from the city council. So because of that one council member, we said, okay, how can we come up with something that doesn't, that has to get the full buy-in of the council before staff does a tremendous amount of work. And so that's how this started. We also had originally written petitions where the public could just go fill out a written petition to be on the agenda, and it was we had a section of written petitions, but we combined them both together for this 030 policy. But what this has transformed to is now the 030 policy is just, especially for the council members, it's just personal agendas of the council members, throw the 030 policy. I've never seen so many 030 policies as I've had in the past 2 years. So it's personal agendas of council members, and it's also council members that were not able to get their projects through at the goal setting session would put them on one by one for 030s. So then, you know, the council, oh yeah, we'll accept it. Yes, we'll accept it. And so what it does is we have a plan for the year, and that's what I fear about this year, or 2024. We come up with this great strategic plan for the city, but we have the 030s, and those who don't get what, you know, they want, they come and they put it on every, you know, every week or every council meeting. And we can't run this city like that. We can't keep pivoting away from the important work that we're doing, and I like city manager that you said when a 030 comes on from a council member should be an important issue, not a personal agenda or an attack on someone, which is usually me or something like that. It has to be, it should be an important issue or a citizen has an issue that they've brought forward that you either sponsor it or, you know, or it's something that's of the general welfare. And so I think we need to change this, and I like the fact that it has to go through, if it's the policy wise, go through staff first, so that both you, city manager, and you, city attorney, can vet some of these, you know, in my terms, ridiculous 030s that keep coming forward. So I think that we have to do something, and if this is what's gonna change it, then I'll support it, you know, moving forward, because the important part wasn't for the council's 030s to dominate every agenda. It's for the public and the written petitions that come in that we need to address first and foremost. And then if there's something important that the staff has missed or that's not getting the attention that's, you know, we're citywide that we need attention to, then that is a 030, but it's not, it's turned into something, you know, way different than that. And that dominates most of our meetings, talking about these things. So, so I like what you have proposed, and I think that I don't mind going back to the old written petitions from the public and bringing them up under public presentations, because we really are supposed to serve the public first. And if we can get them in towards the beginning of the meeting, I do like that. So those are my comments.
Any other members? Member Chow.
Thank you, Chair. Anything in the process which can improve the process makes it better. I agree to that. And I'm open to look at the new 030 proposed changes and proposed policy. At the same time, I know Mayor Gilmore mentioned that people are bringing personal agendas. I object to that. There is no personal agenda. I hope there is no personal agenda. Everybody is working here as an elected official for the city of Santa Clara. So I object to that. If I'm not sure whether I have brought any 030 forward to the council, but I object to that comment basically. And one of the problem is not bringing 030. The problem is when 030 is there's a discussion starts on that topic. That's the biggest part of it. 030 should be up and down vote with a very brief discussion. And historically, what has happened that one way or the other, the discussion starts. We have to curtail that discussion to bare minimum, whether we want to put it on the council, future council agenda or not. That's it. I know it is mentioned within the staff report also, there should not be any detailed discussion about pros and cons of that, but it's just to whether we want to bring it to the forward to the next meeting. So I'm ready to look at the proposed changes if it makes the system more efficient. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move to public comment.
Yeah, thanks. So staff's, this is a quote from the thing. Staff has researched and surveyed other cities yet to find a city with a formal public written process like the process currently provided in the city's 030 policy. Public typically addresses the council decision body making through public comment, public presentation. Staff's proposed revisions to the existing 030 policy go beyond most jurisdictions, what most jurisdictions provide, but also prevents any member of the public from unilaterally requiring city council consideration or action on a proposed item that may not be appropriate for its consideration or vote. My question, currently, how can the public, quote, unilaterally require city council consideration or action on a prepared item that may not be appropriate for such consideration or vote? That came from the city manager's summary here. Also, city manager and city departments, members of the public may also petition the city manager, city staff. The city manager and or staff may respond as appropriate or direct member of the public for other methods to contact the city. I've contacted the city manager and city attorney multiple times, still have not gotten a response about how I was attacked by council members verbally from the dais multiple times. Nobody from the city attorney or city manager's office has ever stepped up or said anything that I know of, other than right now when these two started going at it. And I think that's appalling. And what I'm hearing is, it seems like the written petition is being removed from the city for the public. It doesn't look like, at least the way I read it, that I have to go as a member of the public, and Chair Jane has probably done the most O3Os that I've seen in the past 20 years. They usually happen once, twice a year until the last few years. But now I have to go to a member of the council just to make my voice known other than public comment. I think that is egregious. And I don't know if that's what you meant, but what I'm taking away is I no longer have the right to submit a written petition.
Any other members of the public? Okay.
Could you clarify that, please? Because that's not what it is. It'd be, read written petition.
So a member of the public can still submit a written petition. That will go under public comment. The change is that as currently configured, if a member of the public submits a 030, it requires the city council to take an action on that item that night. Or at least they could take no action, right? But it agendizes it for a vote. The proposed revisions aligns it to what is more of an industry standard practice, where someone can submit a written petition to the governing body via email, on the agenda, for public comment. They can state it at the meeting, and council can, one, refer that item to staff, say that item is urgent, I'd like it to be heard at an upcoming meeting, or they can take no action on the item. And so there's still the ability for the public to write a written petition to the organization, both at the meeting or at any other time.
Any other member of the public online? Okay, do we?
Mr. Chair, if I might just follow up on Member Chahal's comment regarding, the discussions on items at the agendas. That really is a responsibility of mine, working with the Madam Mayor as the presiding officer in order to manage those discussions. We included a little bit more guidelines, here than you've had before on that. But as is the case with a lot of these things, rules are only as good as, right, how you administer them. And so confident the mayor and I, particularly with a little bit more robust, policy and verbiage, can manage, those discussions. It's not always easy, right? There can be line blurring, right, between the substance of the issue and whether or not it warrants, further consideration at a future meeting. But I'm determined to, again, working with our presiding officer to put some appropriate guidelines around that. So enough information is provided as to what's really, being contemplated. The issues regarding timing and prioritization, and is this being handled in some other way, are discussed, but that there not be extensive deliberations on the item itself. So I'm going to commit to you you've seen me intervene, and do things like that before on considerations and other circumstances. This will help, me help you, in effect, focus those discussions.
Okay, Member Gilmore.
Yes, and we're all guilty. Every single one of us is guilty of talking during those 030s. Every one of including myself, on that. One thing that I have noticed, especially with this council, it's never happened to me before, but when I bang the gavel, they don't stop. I bang, I say stop, they don't stop. I have to bang it several times, even though at the beginning of every council meeting, the city clerk reads, when the mayor bangs the gavel, discussion stops. But I have a council that doesn't respect that. So when we say stop and I bang the gavel, when we're going too far on, it just doesn't stop. So maybe I should put that on the next agenda and talk about that. But we're all guilty of the 030 discussions. But you're right, there is a fine line between discussing whether or not we want it to put it on the agenda and the getting into the topic itself. So there is a fine line there.
Madam Mayor and Mr. Chair, if I might, part of this effort, particularly with managing, council, communications, staff about things that you might want to be have considered. If in fact an item comes back out under the out to the council, right, that you're not satisfied, right, with what either the city manager or I say to you about what might be going on, right, already with respect to this and issues with resources and timing or legality otherwise, you reserve the right, of course, to put it on the agenda. But hopefully during that interactive process, it takes some shape that is a little more curated, right, as opposed to in its raw form. And I think that will help too, Madam Mayor. The thing that all of us are talking about, and I think we all have a common interest in managing, is, an item that has some curation and is naturally of limited discussion based on the fact that we've had some interaction on it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Do we have a motion?
Approval of the staff recommendation here.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Now we move on to item number 5, information report on transcription services for meeting recordings.
Thank you, Chair Jane, Member Jahal, and Member Gilmore, members of the public. The staff report that we are discussing recommends deferring a number of items to your next meeting, your December 4th.
I think we're on the previous one.
All right. Okay, I will adjust. The item that is before us is an informational report on transcription services for various meetings and recordings. We don't have a slide, but on page 2 of the staff report, we list a number of the city's advisory bodies, as well as the Neighborhood Stadium Relations Committee, the Neighborhood University Relations Committee, as well as your city council and stadium authority meetings, and provide the committee with a summary of how that meeting is broadcast, as well as our transcription abilities. I know that there was a desire by, I think, Chair Jane to have auto-generated transcription services for more meetings. We are able to do that, but not for all meetings. And it is important to note that we do not have staff capacity to review what is essentially a AI generated transcript. And so while some bodies do have them, there's not a disclaimer on there, but we're going to add one because they do not always get everything right. They are, I would say, consistently inaccurate, but it's a tool that we have available to us now. And I think Santa Clara, like many cities during COVID, new tools became available. We were all working remotely and trying to facilitate business still occurring, and we utilized tools. One of them was AI transcriptions that are put out in their raw form without review and editing. Review and editing would involve significant staff time and additional resources, and I do not recommend, and I do not believe that the committee is supportive of allocating resources to either have human-generated transcripts or edited versions of the AI transcripts. But we did want to provide the informational item to facilitate a discussion here at this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, any comments from my colleagues? Member Gilmore.
I think it's something we'd like to have in the future, but I've read those auto-generated. Sometimes they're really hard to follow. They're confusing, but that's a nice to have for the committee meetings. I mean, most of our meetings are televised as well, so I'd say we note and file this.
Any other comments? Members of the public? Okay, I have some comments. So I use these transcripts regularly because I can search for an item rather than have to watch the whole meeting, and the transcripts have the timestamp. So if I know that a certain topic is going to be there, I go to the transcript. I only use it to find the timestamp, and then I can watch. And the audio or the video is really the record. It's the official record of the meeting. And if we put the appropriate disclaimers, I like having the transcripts. My questions are, how long are those transcripts available? I know that they're not posted automatically. So I know the council ones and the planning commission ones are posted automatically, but the other ones are not. So I think I heard that they're available by request. And then my other question is, how long will those be archived? Can I access them 7 years down the road?
I'll turn this over to staff, but let me say a couple things before I do that. It's important to note that these AI-generated transcripts are not a permanent record. They are not intended to be the official minutes or recording of the meeting. It also occurred to me, as I was thinking about this a few days ago, that if we take the long view of history, recorded minutes are the official record for a reason, right? I know oftentimes people say, "Oh, we have the video. Let's have that be the record." Well, if we had that, they'd be on Betamax and VHS, and no one would be able to access it, right? And I think it's important that we're mindful on what we keep in a written form, because if we attempt to make that a permanent record and attempt to say that, even though we're talking today, this is not a permanent record, but years from now, when someone looks at that microfiche, it's not going to reflect the reality. And so no matter what we do, it's important that we maintain that the official record of the meeting is the minutes. And if we've turned on this AI tool during COVID, and I totally respect that it is helpful, but we want to make sure that we're not retaining it. And right now, we are not treating it as a permanent record. And so why don't I turn it over to staff now to talk about how they can be accessed and how long we retain them.
So at this time, the meetings that are conducted in a hybrid form on your report with the table that have Zoom always have an auto-generated transcript available right after this meeting. It's available. Upon request, if someone requests it, we can provide the document with the disclaimer that it is not edited. As far as how long it's stored, staff, it's really a staff role to save the document in our city retention. Right now, that might be in the city drives or whatnot. So it's always there until someone basically deletes it, or it could be put into our retention program, which is Laserfiche, where it can be scanned, where it would remain permanently. But as city manager said, it's not a record of the meeting, so that hasn't been implemented. It's been just upon request. If someone wants a Zoom transcript, we can provide it. That's for any meetings that are hybrid on Zoom only.
I have some questions regarding that. So the thing about it is that there's been a discussion about selling Loyalton, and when staff went back to the minutes for Loyalton, there was recorded there a discussion among council members about using Loyalton as a recreational facility. And now we've moved to action minutes. And when we have action minutes, it's just a yes or no vote on the item. And so at some point, everything will disappear. Yeah, and that was from 1977. So I want to make sure that somewhere the discussion is maintained so that someone can go back and look at that. And if we're going to keep the audio and video for that long, I would appreciate that we keep the audio for that long so that someone can go back and figure out what people were really talking about when they made a vote. Because on the Loyalton property, it was very important for me to see that council members rejected using Loyalton as a recreational facility.
Okay, do you need a
Member
motion?
Chahal.
Well, Nora, our Assistant City Clerk, is online and she has her hand raised.
Okay, Nora, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair and board members. Nora Pimentel, Assistant City Clerk. Just wanted to let you know that according to our retention schedule that I'm looking at right now, our videos, audio, those are permanent records. So you have that as the permanent record. And I know you say you don't like to go to that record or the video. However, we do timestamp the meeting. When you were speaking of the action minutes, the action taken by the body is reflected. It's a little more than just a yes, no, because we are adding what the council is voting on. And when the council amends sometimes the recommendation, staff recommendation. So that is being captured. And as I stated, the audio, video of those meetings our permanent record. Our current retention schedule doesn't talk about transcripts. And that'll be something that when we do the revision and update to the retention schedule, perhaps we will add a component of that.
Okay, thank you. You know, one of the things is that I like to watch meetings at a faster than normal speed. It saves time. And so when we have audio recordings, to be able to listen to those at a faster speed. And, you know, I'm just trying to help the public be able to access these in a better way. And retention schedule, I'm glad that the audio and video are permanent records. That's important to me. But it is difficult to search. Maybe in the future we'll be able to do that, but it's very difficult to search an audio or a video at this time for a particular topic or a particular statement. So in the future, it'll probably get better. Chahal.
Thank you, Chair. I actually had that question, like storage is cheap now. It's not costly to store this data. And I think Nora answered my question that they are available for, we are not destroying any audio videos. And at least that is available. My request would be like, put them, all these audio video, we need to make a library or so that the residents can easily search this thing. I think I was searching something on City of Mountain View site, and their search was much more user-friendly than ours, basically. And I was able to search with the topic and other stuff. I got all the data, basically. So that user-friendly search capability for any of the commission or any of the meetings would really be helpful. But, and where the links for all these meetings are, it should not be, are these posted on our site, all these meeting, audio, video, everything? Okay, okay, got it. Okay.
For particular committees, so governance is posted on YouTube and also on the Legistar, but not all the bodies are.
All those bodies are not. Oh, okay, okay. That's my request. If we are storing for all the bodies, why not post them also, like the URL link for all those bodies underneath, okay, the calendar and everything.
Okay, Member Gilmore.
Yes, I think that the fact that it's stored with video, audio, it's all on YouTube, all of, well, at least our council meetings are, and other meetings, planning commission meetings, and that, and those are not official minutes of the city. We have audio, video, and written minutes. I think that would be enough. I make a motion to note and file this informational report, which is informational anyway.
Member Chahal.
Yeah, I'll second that with some suggestion we gave, like if we can look into the user-friendly search of these down the line for the agenda items.
So-
I'll say okay, because I think we're always trying to improve our search capacities on our website and other things so that we continue to do that, make it easier for the resident to find what they need.
I'll
So,
second.
okay, just a comment. On Legistar, there are two ways to search. I was searching the wrong way, and then our IT manager had to show me the correct way to search. So if you don't know that, I can show you. There's a search that results in better results. So, okay, so we have a motion and a second, Gilmore and Chahal. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, opposed? Okay, passes unanimous.
I have to, I
Avoid any conflicts between the council members and the mayor and the long process, due process we are doing. And that's the reason I wanted this to be prioritized and taken up today, basically. Yeah. And I know there are some other 030 pulled only for this policy, basically, but that pertains to this policy. So if we don't take it up and we keep punting it out, then there will be more 030 type of a request. And that doesn't serve the purpose of making meetings more efficient versus finalizing and fixing the issues we are facing. That's why I wanted this to be taken up. Thank you.
Um, Yeah, I'm wondering if we can add meetings of the Governance and Ethics Committee to fit these in, because there are a number of items that we're not able to get to. What does it take to add meetings to this body? Can you talk about workload and such?
Sure. So I guess at a very basic level, is it possible to have a special meeting of the Governance and Ethics Committee to do the work, to discuss these items? Yes. I think the question comes to when, which is, we know your next regularly scheduled meeting is December 4th. There's certainly several months between then and now. It is a scheduling item for the committee members. It is a workload item for staff to say, okay, what items are we going to discuss? And when will the meeting potentially occur, and can we get the work done? I will note some of the items, in particular, the 020, your proclamation policy, has implications on a legal interpretation with the charter. And I think the city attorney would need time for that analysis as well. I recognize that it is a very important thing that council members would like to talk about and potentially amend. And so when a special meeting can occur, I'm not ready to opine and provide a date. I will say that there are a number of other high-level things that we are working on for the council. One is the Charter Review Committee. Another is we are in the process of internally launching the project for potential November 24 ballot items that we will need to talk about and make substantial progress on between now and December, in order that we can launch that, undertake the appropriate voter research, likely voter polls, as well as your policy setting that will need to begin in January and be concluded in the first 6 months so we can do the work to put it on the ballot. On top of that, one of the reasons why this is not on today's agenda is because another very important priority of the council and this committee was priority setting. And so we did carve out time and say, let's work on preparing a proposal for priority setting and talk to the committee about that so that we can launch priority setting, because at almost every meeting, topics are coming up or potential 030s are being proposed. And the answer is defer to priority setting, defer to priority setting. We haven't had a priority setting in 2 years, right? And so we did carve out time to work on that. And so I'm not saying a special meeting cannot occur. I'm just saying at this moment, I'm not ready to propose a date for a special meeting.
Just as a,
Question was, you're not willing to propose a date, but would it be a huge burden to add a special meeting?
We can have a meeting. Absolutely. The committee can direct that, right? We serve at the pleasure of the committee, and we will need to adjust workloads. There are a few items that I need to make sure that we continue to make progress on as we do all the other regular business that's coming up on the council work plan. So I think we need to discuss what items you'd like to talk about at a special meeting, and a lot of work that can't be done right now with assessing how long is it going to take to analyze and prepare for that item, as well as when we can fit it in scheduling wise.
I think what you're hearing from the city manager, and I will echo it, is very politely saying, we have a lot going on between now and December. It might even be challenging for us to come back with the quality of work we always want you to get from us, even on the items that are on the December agenda, and the idea of accelerating, that on some items, while we totally appreciate the importance of it and your prioritization of it, in light of other things that couple of which the city managers described, a couple of others you know about, that I think you would agree are even higher priority. It could be challenging for us to come back with a quality presentation on this or other topics prior to December. We're obviously at your disposal and would be willing to explore that with you further. But I'm being a little more direct and less polite than the city manager was in describing to you what we feel like we've got in front of us these next few months. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, just one more question before I get to Member Chahal. Typically, the council approves the meeting schedule for, say, Planning Commission and things. Does the full council have to approve a special meeting of the governance or
I don't think so. I'm looking to staff to see, I think a majority of you could call a special meeting, and that would be within your purview, and Nadine nodded at me, so I know I'm right.
Right, Member Chahal?
That was my question. I got the answer. Who calls the special meeting, basically? So I got that.
Okay, do we have a motion? Oh, public comment, yeah.
In the staff report, it said, given our other priorities and workload of the Governance Ethics Committee, staff recommends deferring the following items to future dates based on priorities in committee. And we heard that, totally get it. One thing I haven't heard in any of those is where ethics falls in there. I've heard AB 1234 being one of the things that came out of this spring going back to the full council. And AB 1234 is like the baseline minimum legal requirement for ethics discussions. And I would defer to the city attorney, city manager to confirm that. But my understanding, it is the entry level, the 101 class of ethics. And if this committee majority that's sitting here right now is comfortable with that, I would ask that that be shared with the full council, because I don't believe that it is appropriate to just kind of wave off and say, we're doing AB 1234 training and that's good enough for our ethics and we'll see what else comes up. You know, Rome is burning and we're talking about wallpaper right now. You need to be focused on the core issues of ethics and public trust in this city and on this council. And I haven't heard still if you think there is an ethics issue or a public trust issue with this council. I've asked directly, I've asked indirectly. It doesn't seem to be willing to be addressed. One of the things that somebody shared with me, leadership at the top is necessary for any ethics program to succeed. That means council and manager and attorney and clerk at the very least. Without leadership, no ethics implementation plan can succeed. Focus on the key elements to make that happen. How does that happen if you don't prioritize it? You're talking about proclamations and things like that, O2O. You know, honestly, who cares about that if you have a public trust and issues, and ethics issues? I mean, that is so minor. If that's the priority, you know, why don't you share that with the public? Because they're not at this meeting, obviously.
Okay, thank you. Anyone online?
Do you have Wanda Buck with her hand raised?
Okay,
Wanda?
Yes, you know, I think we need an ethics committee. I think you all have too much to do. And whether it's staff or whether it's this committee or with its city council, ethics don't seem to be a priority. And it is an issue. I think you all know it's an issue. We need to be able to approach it so that people don't feel threatened. And I still remember the first meeting that the attorney came to where he said he had some ideas from his other city and we were going to have a meeting with the public there. And just, you know, it takes so long to do everything. I understand bureaucracy and I know that you care about our city. So what do we need to do? Do we need petitions or whatever 030 is? What do we need to do to knock at the door, to make it a priority? Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else?
No other hands raised.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to action to defer work plan items to December 4, 2023, Governance and Ethics Committee meeting, subject to the discussion we had. If there would need to be a special meeting, then chair can talk to the staff. Thank you.
Do we need to vote on creating a special meeting? I personally would not recommend one until after December.
I put that forward because of the discussion you had. Basically,
mhm.
if you want to have it, then I put it in the motion.
All right, so the motion is to accept staff's recommendation. I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes 2 with one absence. That includes the meeting. Do we have
Except,
a
Mr. Chair, for a
staff
fairly
report?
robust staff report today.
Oh, okay,
The city manager has monopolized the meeting so far. He's deferred all of my comments to the tail end of the meeting. And by golly, no matter how long we've talked so far, I'm going to make the most of it, Mr. Chair. I'm teasing, of course, it won't take too long, but there's been a lot of discussions about the AB 1234 training, what it is, what people want it to be. I want to give you a status update on kind of where we're at, with that, and describe a little bit what it is and what it isn't, for purposes of certainly this group and the public. Good news, first of all, as a result of some helpful polling by city clerk's office, we have a date for this long-awaited training. It's October 26th. It's going to be from 5 to 8 p.m. It's going to be in these council chambers. There hasn't been noticing yet out to the public, but there will be. One interesting thing about it is it's not going to be a conventional council meeting. You're not going to be on the dais. I'm not going to be up there speaking to you there. You're going to be sitting out probably with some priority seating in the front row in the audience. And I am accompanied by some others, certainly Liz Klotz from my office, and I might draft the city clerk into it. If she's still listening, she may be cringing. But we're going to be presenting to you from up front at the podium, and you're going to be kind of in the audience, along with other boards and commission members who are going to be invited to attend, along with potentially senior staff, people who are going to be invited to attend, and along with members of the public who will be invited to attend. So it'll be different. And the actual invites, to that and the noticing of that will be coming out pretty shortly. One thing just to note for the public, while the public certainly invited and will be given an opportunity to provide, to ask, questions, it'll be at the end of the meeting. It really is intended to be a training, right, for the people who need the training. I'll stay if the public can't get all of their comments in after hours for as long as the public needs me to answer kind of any questions that they might have about the issues that are raised. The thing that, and the mayor mentioned, that this training is something that you're all required, to take, notably within 1 hour of 1 hour. You don't have to do it that quickly. Within 1 year of taking office, and then every 2 years thereafter. The version that most of you take is a online version, which is very sterile and not very helpful, and doesn't have practical tools, doesn't talk at all about what your local ethics, rules are. You're not required to for AB 1234 certification. Mine will be very different from that. It's going to be live. It's going to be interactive. I'm going to try to make it a little bit fun. Again, the public will be at least able to observe and at the end, provide input into it. So I think you'll find that it's a very different animal from what you're used to. That being said, at least this version of the training is designed to be AB 1234 compliant. In other words, if you attend this and you're a AB 1234 a governed legislative body member or employee, I will be in a position to issue you a certificate at the end of this meeting in order for you to comply. That's good news and bad news. the good news is it actually serves that very tangible value. I know a lot of you are already up to speed, others may be too. Where I used to be, we would time this every couple of years to try to catch a large group, of the people who were coming due. And it was really helpful for people that way. I've had presentations where I've issued 50 certificates, right, to people who are looking to come into compliance. The bad news for that is there is a very specific, substantial agenda of topics that need to be covered in order for it to be considered AB 1234 certifiable. There are general discussions of ethics principles, but we've got to talk about gifts, rewards, honoraria, Form 700 disclosures, concepts of misuse of public resources, solicitations of political support, restrictions on loans and other types of economic interests. We need to talk about conflicts of interest, Government Code Section 1090, provisions, financial interests in contracts, gifts of public funds, misuse of public resources, mass mailing prohibitions, common law conflicts of interest. We also need to talk about the Brown Act, the Public Records Act, due process. That's before you talk at all about whatever your local ethics, standards are. My version of this training does touch on that. In Chula Vista, we had an actual board of ethics. We had a actual ethics code. I talked about those things, and they were very much something that I described to people. But they couldn't be the focus of what the presentation was because the curriculum is so large. And so I will absolutely talk about your local rules, but it won't be probably the extent to which or with the interaction on those subjects that maybe some of you, may want. I also want to distinguish, if I might, between standard concepts of ethics and principles of ethics that I'll talk about in the AB 1234 training, and just personal conduct, right? And how you all acquit yourselves and treat each other. That's really a different thing, right? There's ethics, standards and rules of conduct that are primarily focused on, making sure that you don't abuse, the powers of office. It's a whole different thing to talk about how any organization, board level, staff level, between board and staff kind of gets along with each other, and treats each other, with respect. That's certainly an ethics concept, but it is not a core element of AB 1234, training, and it's not even a core element, although it is a mentioned element of your local rules. And so this training, again, will, I think, be a lot. And it's a little more than 101, and it touches on some really pretty important, core topics, but it won't necessarily satisfy, the people who, including among all of you that, are unhappy with, some of your interactions, and the kind of the distractions and the issues and challenges that can create. That might be a separate thing that I know it's been talked about, that the city managers talked about, that could be focused on in different ways. And so I think the AB 1234 training is going to be good. It's going to get at some of these things, but it's not magic. I think it's pretty good. And in fact, my little due process training with the Historic Landmarks, Commission on at least the due process component of it met with rave reviews, and they're all eagerly waiting from now my AB 1234 training, somewhat to my surprise. And I'm joking a little bit about that, but they seemed actually pretty excited about coming to the AB 1234 training. So that's my presentation on that, Mr. Chair. Definitely something to look forward to. There'll be more about that being described and promoted, out to the community, and hopefully we'll set it up and it'll be a good, positive experience, for everybody. One of the things that I'm working on, discussing with the city manager that we've not settled on yet is potentially the consideration of extending the AB 1234 training requirement out to employees. It's actually not a requirement under state law. It only requires to elected or appointed officials, you all and your boards and commission members who are entitled to reimbursements because, right, there's potential money, flowing in your official capacity. It does not apply to employees. Where I was before, it was actually extended to all Form 700, filers, which was a good, 100 plus, 200, plus in our organization number of employees. It's an additional burden, right? It's an additional challenge. It could be important and something we talk about, but there's some other things that need to be sorted out, for that. So we might not quite get the crowd, that I'm used to getting because it doesn't apply and people don't have to get, that certificate here, yet. The way it was down where in Chula Vista where I gave this presentation, but hopefully there'll be a pretty good turnout and at least those that come will get some value out of it. So that's my update on that. Mr. Chair, and before I do my next update, open to questions you may have about that.
Yeah, I guess my understanding is that all of the council members have taken the AB 1234.
I think that everyone is, I know some of you have taken it a few times, right? Depending upon your tenure and you're already certified. And so you don't have to come, but I want you to come. And if a quorum of you comes, we'll convene it as a council meeting.
I think my question was, given the issues about the ethics and values documents within the city, would it be reasonable to make a non-compliant AB 1234 and spend more time on our internal ethics and values programs? I'd be happy to have a second meeting to cover that.
Yeah,
as well. But
I think I'd probably prefer to do it that way. I think what I will, what in light of everyone's interests and considerations, I will look at places within the AB 1234 requirements to trim that back and maybe try to give a little extra treatment to what the local, rules are. But again, that's still not kind of the interactive, kind of facilitated, right, maybe potential version of what I think a lot of you are interested in and talking about in terms of, just the interactions, amongst you that would facilitate, I think more comfort, in decision making. So I appreciate that. I had been thinking that as well. And if I can trim back the AB 1234 certification stuff and develop and afford a little bit more focus on some of your local rules, I'll endeavor to do that. I think that's good input.
any other members? I think this is just staff report. So we can move on to update to email retention.
Yes, and this one I'll be, I'm sorry, truly brief on. And Mr. Chair, you know this, there have been proposals to revisit the city's retention policy, even exploring increasing the 90-day kind of email text, current standard from up to 2 years, at least for council, members. And we're looking at that. We're looking at, though, a lot of issues, right now in this area. Both in light of the volume of the PRAs, that this organization gets, the challenges that every organization has with communications on personal versus, city devices, the definition of what constitutes a transitory document, right? And who should be the one who's making determinations regarding what a transitory document is. And I will add, San Jose seems to be the center of PRA rulemaking, right? It was a San Jose case back in 2017 that made it clear that the official communications on personal devices were nonetheless public records, which kind of changed, the landscape for a lot of organizations. There's now a recent, you may have read about it, San Jose, at least Superior Court case now, it's not an appellate case yet, that raises a number of other different issues about elected officials or PRA subject public officials duties with respect to, some of their records that are really requiring us in a lot of jurisdictions to look at a lot of these things. And so while the proposal we heard about is an element of this, it really is something that needs to be looked at, we think, comprehensively. And we appreciate your patience as we kind of dive into this and come back with, we think, a variety of different changes that we're hoping will both improve the quality of our Public Records Act responses to the public, that will manage the burden, that places on, staff and regulating those things, that facilitates and makes more clear, your role, in preserving and providing records as a result of that process. And we think it would be better dealt with in that comprehensive way. So we appreciate your patience. I promise you we're working on it, and hopefully we'll come back with report outs to either this group or full council, within the next number of months on some improvements in that area. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sorry, City Manager, did you want to add? Okay.
Move on to committee member reports, future referrals for considerations. Are there any? Okay, I actually have one. So I've heard from a number of members of the public that our public presentations is after consent. And sometimes they can take a long time depending on if it's an affordable housing project or if it's a BMX track or whatever. I would like to have staff consider what VTA does, which is put public presentations at the beginning for 30 minutes, could be longer. And then the balance of that would go to the end of the meeting. That way you limit how long people have to wait to get to the agendized items. So that's just something for staff to consider.
Chair, may I ask for a little clarification? One, are you referring that to the December 4th meeting that is already very packed and I don't think we could accomplish everything that's on that agenda? Or are you allowing staff the flexibility to plan that discussion sometime in 2024? Totally understand that it appears to be a simple request of move public comment up and limit the time. I think the level of robust discussion that will happen both at the committee level and at the city council level is something that staff needs time to analyze the topic and prepare for, as well as honestly, given the number of things that you have in the next 8 months coming up on the council agenda, we need to plan that discussion. I think we're really approaching a point on your city council agendas, as you know, oftentimes go into 11, if not 1 o'clock, where there's just not enough time to accomplish the regular business. And any potential contentious topic we put on, we need to plan it out and maybe even move things around so that we carve out enough time so that an important item important is the wrong word, an item that needs to go on a certain night can go, and we're appropriately balancing the council agenda. So my recommendation would be if that item is supported, allow staff the flexibility to plan for it in 2024.
I'm fine with that. Yeah. City Attorney, do we vote on those referral items? I mean, they're not agendized, so I don't know.
At the chair's discretion.
Sure.
Thank you. It won't be long. So first off, I think the way public presentations used to be at the end of the meeting, way back when, I remember, because I used to wait through all these ridiculously long meetings to have public presentation for you too. Back then it was limited 2 minutes. It got moved up. The consent calendar happens really, really fast. Other than special orders of business that happen first, then the consent. There's no discussion on consent items. Anything that's pulled happens after public presentation. So I don't think there's a timing issue. I understand the interest of limiting how long that is so you can get going. But then you're going to have this, well, I was here first and you were here first. And then I just think that's a very risky thing to do. It doesn't seem to take that long to get through public presentation. So I just think that's, if you're worried about prioritizing things, prioritize, doing other ethical discussions like our code of, behavioral conduct, ethics code of conduct, and like the grand jury report. Like prioritize that before you worry about the public presentation stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I think you don't need a formal vote, but consensus of the two of you to add that as something you'd like to be included in your discussions for your 2024 work plan would be the appropriate action, and you can do it by consensus.
Staff heard about it, so.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.